Good morning. John Gilkison here. It is Thursday, October 10th, 2024, and I've been wanting to shoot a video for the last few weeks, but a week ago I had a little bit of oral surgery done, and as you can see here, there's a little bit of swelling left here, but there's quite a bit of extensive bruising around here and on my neck. Not quite sure what all that's about. So I don't want to scare you all, but I am improving rapidly, so I thought it was time to go ahead and shoot a video, even though it looks like I've been in a bar fight. I'm doing well. I've written a new blog, and it's called Putting on My Nostradamus Hat or New Technology Adoption. And it's just been some thoughts that have been rolling around in my head for the past month or so about just when will electric cars have their inflection point, when will they become mainstream, and when will most people catch on, and even if they haven't bought an EV yet, it'll become their next purchase. And we're rapidly coming to that point. You can see it just in the last couple of years, the uptake in EV adoption. A couple of years ago, it was rare for me to see an EV out there. I would see them, but now I can, on a day's travel to town and back, I can see two or three. This is all anecdotal, of course. I just live in a backwater part of the world, but even here it's happening. And I'm seeing a lot more DC rapid chargers coming online around us here, and the newer cars, the cars that are available, are have more range, better qualities, so forth, better prices. So it is happening. So what triggered this was I had a discussion on Facebook the other day. Some lady made a comment, said she couldn't afford an electric vehicle. And I just told her, I said, you can't afford a gas vehicle either. You just don't know it. She said, what do you mean? You know, question mark. And the reason I made this comment is I happened to have our Ioniq 5 at the dealership the other day for routine service. I think software upgrade or something. And I was out on the lot and I was looking in the front of the building. There was Honda CR-Vs, which is a small SUV style vehicle, parked there, gas powered, and they had the Moroni sticker on it, and it said 37 miles per gallon. This vehicle's estimated cost per year is $1,400. And I went, wow, it cost me less than $200 a year to operate our Ioniq 5. So this has to be the greatest secret ever kept. Now, I'll grant you, we have a special off-peak rate of 4.7 cents a kilowatt hour if we charge between midnight and 8 a.m. And most people might not have that in their part of the world, but we pay 12 cents a kilowatt hour normally just for on-peak electricity and without that special rate. So even so, that would only raise, if I charged at 12 cents a kilowatt hour all the time and didn't have solar like I do, it would still only cost me about $500 a year to electrify my car for a year's travel. And compared to $1,400, that's a significant amount of money. So people are losing, just by owning a gas car, they're losing $100 a month approximately. This is going to vary, of course. These are just round numbers. So, and this kind of set off some recollections. I was born in 1950, and I can remember as a child, my parents owned a bar and a restaurant. It was combined, and it was also a motel. And it was in Arizona, and we had jukeboxes, which I just took as normal. But it turns out, as an adult, I discovered that the 45 RPM record wasn't introduced till about 1952. So this was new technology. It was only the 45 RPM playing jukebox was new. It was only 3 or 4 years old. There were no 45s before that to play in a jukebox. So the adults in the room probably couldn't have told you that at the time. We never watched TV at all until I was 10 years old. We lived 140 miles from Phoenix, and we couldn't pull the signal out of the air. I've seen some people do it with really high antennas, mast, and still it would look like a snowstorm. I mean, you could see the TV fade in and out, black and white. I did watch TV a couple times. It was kind of a hoot. But it was only when we moved back to Ohio did I get to watch TV on a regular basis. But I remember going over to the neighbor's house and seeing color TVs. And this is in the 1960s, the early 1960s. And I can remember remarking even to myself as still a child that the colors looked unnatural. They looked highly saturated. And at that time it was all tube driven CRTs, and they were fiddly. They had to be tuned just right to work. And I never owned a color TV personally until 1979, although I think my parents had one when I became an adult. Let me see here. My wife and I bought our first microwave oven in 1983, and it was a giant thing, and it had all analog controls. I mean, it's twice the size of any modern microwave oven. And then at that time in the early 1980s, I remember I had friends who played around with personal computer kits. And they were trying to talk me into buying one. You know, for a couple $100 you could get this kit, and you could put it together in your home, and you could play around, do all these computer things. And I was going, well, what practical use do I have for one? I mean, I couldn't think of anything. Word processing wasn't even a thing yet then. These were just hobbyist things. And so I never bought one. The internet was just a gleam in somebody's eye at the time. We never had a personal computer in our house until around the year 2000, although I used them at work before, and then I could see a compelling case for having one. Basically, it was email, internet access, and so forth. And we got one. At that time, we had dial-up, and you had CRTs. Didn't have flat screens. You can tell a movie was shot in the late 1990s simply because computers in the movie will usually be CRTs. Fast forward to the 1990s, and I was in business I had a business partner, and one of the things we had was a giant brick cell phone, about yay big. You know, like a walkie-talkie from a World War II combat movie or something. You'd hold it up, and it had a short battery life. Probably had nickel metal, cadmium batteries or something, I don't know. And if you made a long-distance call, if you were, let's say, in Hatch, New Mexico, and you wanted to call down to Anthony, Texas or something, you had to call collect. Now you just dial any number anywhere, and that's it. And then I can remember several years later, I was, because I worked on campus also. That was my day job. And I'd drive onto campus and I'd see these students walking around holding something up to their ears and talking. What the hell are they doing? And then, I found out it was cell phones, and they were talking on the cell phones of their friends. So that was a new fad. So, and so our first cell phones was in the early 2000s, and we had flip models, of course, flip phones, and you couldn't really text on them. Our daughter texted, but we didn't, because they knew the drill on using that 3 letters on a key thing. They knew how to do it. And then I remember in the mid 2000s, smartphones came in, and why would I want one of those? I'd spend all that money to get an extra, a real expensive phone to do what? Well, I didn't realize it was a personal computer. You could surf the internet and do all these things. Buying things on the internet was kind of novel, and it was kind of a scary experience. So that was the thing. But 10 years later, I remember after 2010, I was at a motel with my 2 brothers, and my one brother was talking to me. He was really proud that he said, "I don't have a personal computer in my house." And I held up my smartphone and I showed it to him, and I said, "This is a personal computer right here." That's how things have leapfrogged, how they change. The world changes around people and they don't know it even. They don't know what they're seeing. I didn't know what I was seeing when I first seen the first smartphone either. So it applies to all of us. Same thing with photography. I can remember my first digital camera was 4 megapixels. But it did have speed control and aperture control stuff, such as it was. And I took some good pictures with it. I still have some of them hanging on the wall in the house here. But I can see they're low res just by looking at them. But they're okay. They're kind of nostalgic now. That's what's happening with electric cars. I think it's that 10-year rule applies. Tony Seba did this famous lecture series where he was showing a picture of New York City streets in the year 1907 or something. 1903, I think it was. Don't quote me on this. But the street was full of horse-drawn carriages, and he says, "Can you spot the one gas-powered car in this picture?" And then he had to put a circle around it. Next slide, same picture with a circle around the car. There's that one gas-powered car in a sea of horse-drawn vehicles. And 12, 13 years later, picture from the same vantage point, same street and everything. And he says, "There's one horse-drawn carriage in this picture. Can you spot it?" And then next slide, there was a circle around the horse-drawn carriage. And 10, 13 years, that's all it took for the sea change in transportation, of course, in New York City, which is, there are probably people still driving horses and buggies for quite a while around, rural areas, Oklahoma, wherever, farm country. Look, you, take this ball and go play with it somewhere else. Go on. Go lay down. Sorry, my dog's here. She's wanting me to take the ball and throw it, which I don't do in the house much. So anyway, so there's that, and I think we're going through exactly that same period of time right now, and I would date it from about 2017, really. We bought our first, this is all anecdotal, it's my personal experience. We bought our first plug-in hybrid electric in 2016, and then after 3 years of owning that, I said, "Why am I hauling around this gas engine?" And I bought an electric car. I owned it for 3.5 years or 3 years or so, and I sold it on to a friend who wanted it because I wanted an electric car with just more range. And we bought the Ioniq 5, which has 800-volt architecture, 10 to 80% charging in 18 minutes, and on a 350 kilowatt charger, and 303 miles of range. And traveling's a breeze in it now. So it's a nothing burger. So that's what's happening, and I predict by the year 2027, this whole argument of gas versus electric is going to be over. There's going to be some people out there still talking smack, but they won't know what they're talking about. Most people know they don't know what they're talking about, and they're just going to start ignoring them. And that's beginning to happen already also. Also, what I think is going to happen, because there is new technology in batteries that's coming online right now, and I think 400 miles, 300 to 400 miles of range is going to be routine in an electric car, and I think price parity will be reached in the next couple of years, and that the debate will be over, because electric cars are so superior in the way they drive and feel, the lack of transmission, the acceleration. Once you get a butt in a seat, people experience that, and then they know you can travel anywhere. Our bragging rights is we traveled to Montana in May. Went all the way up to Billings, Montana, and over to Bozeman, and down through Yellowstone, and so forth, and came back. And so travel's doable. So anyway, that's my Nostradamus hat, or as I like to call it, Nostradamus. There are some problems that are being addressed or remain to be addressed, but I think why it's so controversial, the adoption of electric cars, is because they are the tip of the spear point on the climate change and fossil fuel debate. And most people, we've lived in a fossil fuel powered world for all of our lives, and the whole idea that all this has to change is just hard for them to conceive. But it is changing. And in a day that we don't travel to town or something, we don't see 3 giant turbine blades being pulled down the road with escorts going north to the wind corridors up in northeastern New Mexico to generate power. We have giant turbine field out here just to the northwest of us. And also, the last time we were there a couple days ago, they'd added a massive photovoltaic arrays to the field, and they're doing quite a bit of work on. Obviously, they're laying new power lines to take that power out to where they need it. I think a lot of it's going into Arizona, to be honest with you, but we can use it here too. So, I think one of the great undiscovered pleasures of owning an electric car for most people will be the idea that, hey, I can just charge up in my garage overnight and start the day with a full tank. I don't have to go to one of them smelly gas stations. And with that 80%, 800 volt architecture and that 10 to 80% in 18 minutes, charging on the road on a trip is just a nothing burger. And one of the missing keys, I think, is level 2 charging, destination charging. And what I've discovered I need to do more is get into PlugShare and look for accommodations that have it. And then when I make a motel reservation, make sure they have it, so that I can charge my vehicle overnight when I'm there. In other words, when I arrive, let's say I arrive in Norman, Oklahoma, and I'm going to stay there overnight. Well, if I stay at a motel that has level 2 charging, then I don't have to go find a DC fast charger before I get to the motel, pay to charge up my car with expensive electricity when I could charge overnight at the motel while we're sleeping and get up to a full charge in the morning with a lot cheaper or free electricity included in with the bill. And we need more of that. And we need more level 2 charging also for people who live in apartment complexes, people who have homes that don't have attached garages, maybe have street parking, this kind of thing. Using DC fast charging to charge your electric car all the time makes no sense. You shouldn't be doing it because it's like buying $10 a gallon gasoline. It's the wrong approach. It's for traveling only. And it's very expensive to install these things. That's why the electricity costs so much. You got to recoup this cost. But a level 2 charger is really not that hard. Over the weekend, we were at our camping, and I was charging on 120 volts. But it turns out my portable charger, which is also 240 volts, but converts to 120 volts, charges at 15 amps. So even though I was charging 120 volts, I was charging 30% faster than I was accustomed to. I could pick up quite a few, in 12 hours while we were camping there. In the morning, I picked up quite a bit of charge. So, and all this is stuff. When you're a pioneer in this, you discover these things. And people who don't own an EV don't know any of this stuff. How could they? They've been pumping gas all their life. They're familiar with gas cars, as I was before I owned one. So, so that's my prediction. 2027, no later than 2030. We're going to see an inflection point where it just flips. And at that point, you're going to have price parity or cheaper. An electric car will be cheaper than an equivalent gas car, and your electric car will have 300 to 400 miles of range and fast charging, like our car already has. And it'll be over. There'll be no discussion. There'll be a lot more used electric vehicles out there too. It's taking time for EVs to enter the used car market, and people who never can buy a new car are locked out of the market until there are used EVs out there, and the prices have dropped on all this stuff. So, and I'm trying to convince my kids who've been looking for a car that they should look for an EV, but they don't have the eye for it as I do, and I know they like the idea, but I don't think they know how to go about it. And not a lot I can do about that, but it's happening. That's what I'm trying to get at. More and more. And I'm seeing more chargers out there, and I'm seeing a lot more electric cars on the road. So, take care, everybody. I need to cut this off. I'm at the 24-minute mark. And this thing they took out of my mouth is being biopsied. It's just a lesion. And then 98%, 99% benign most of the time. So I'm not worried about that. But I sure wish this swelling would completely go away and this bruising. It's a nice conversation thing, but I don't want to keep it. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.